Bill, universally known as Dr. Bill.
Exactly.
And Dr. Bill is deeply involved with a very important organization. And one of the things we're going to highlight tonight is a few important organizations that will continue on no matter what happens with this election. Okay? And that when I think about organizing long and short, organizing for this election, but also organizing communities for the long term for healthcare justice in America, when I think about that, I think about this guy, Bill Honickman, who is deeply involved in Progressive Democrats for America. We have their executive director also here. But what is your you have a PDA title? It isn't just Dr. Bill.
State coordinator.
State coordinator and healthcare issue team.
Right. Now there's another, Dr. Bill has another, he's got a lot of feathers in his cap. And one of them was that in 2016, he was the co-chair for the California delegation to the Democratic National Convention for Bernie Sanders. So, Dr. Bill.
All right, Dr. Bill.
Thank you. All right, Dr. Bill.
Yeah, Dr. Bill.
All right.
In the house.
Thank you, Ron. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Alan Minsky, everybody from KPFK. Thank you. Thank you, Alan, for being here, and thanks for taking over the leadership for PDA.
Thank you.
And we're actually two organizations. We're Progressive Democrats America. We're also People Demanding Action. So you can find us, both organizations. The PD America, as we refer to it, is our electoral wing, and so that's why it's very appropriate that we're here in support of Bernie Sanders. We did that in 2016 as well, and in fact in 2012 we were looking at who was going to challenge Hillary Clinton, because if nobody did, our issues would not get talked about. So in 2012, we started to work on convincing Bernie Sanders that he needed to run in the Democratic primary, not as a third-party candidate or some other than, even like they love to. Don't they just love saying Bernie's not really a Democrat? So, but that's okay. He can still run in the Democratic primary, and we can still elect him to be the next president of the United States. And so we did that in 2016. Not thinking that he was going to do as well as he did. I mean, I just heard somebody on MSNBC say, he didn't do that well in 2016. Well, he came actually damn close. I think we had 46% of the delegates. It's a raised awareness. It's why we all even know what Medicare for All is at this point. So, anyhow, if you don't already get our email, because who doesn't need more email, we're going to float a sign-up sheet for PDA, aren't we, Alan? Thanks. And hopefully you got one of our stickers, our We Want Bernie stickers, and that's actually a good way to reach me is through the website, pdamerica.org, which you can find on the sticker. So I'm going to talk a little bit about doctors, because I am one, and what Medicare for All means to us, or should mean to us generally, and more doctors are starting to see the light here on why it is good for us, and in particular, what we're going to do still to convince more and more people, and through Doctors for Bernie, Physicians for National Health Program, and PDA and all these other terrific groups, we're going to keep raising awareness and doing this. So, let me I'm going to bring up kind of three issues that generally are important to doctors, and whatever's important to doctors are important to patients, right?
Yes.
All the caring, right? All the caring professionals. If it's good for us caregivers, then that means it's going to translate into giving good care. What a concept. I have a friend, I live in Orange County, and I have a friend who also lives in Orange County. He's originally from Canada. He's a health systems expert. He studied them. He came here to study us. Interesting, right? And he has developed a kind of an interesting schematic I'm going to share with you. So I know you can't see everything on these pages, but I'll just give you a hint. One of them is how we pay for healthcare in America, and the other one is how they pay for healthcare in Canada. Okay, can you guess which one's which?
Yeah.
Anybody?
Canada's on the right.
Bueller? Anybody? So this is it. This is American healthcare. And the interesting thing is, you know, as concerns us caregivers, is that this is where the patient starts, and this is where the provider gets paid. They get to go through all that. So what does that represent to you?
Fucked up system.
Waste, not just waste,
Yeah.
waste, fraud, and abuse.
Yes.
That's what this is. It's an opportunity to hide fraud, and whenever they do that, they're abusing our patients, and that abuses us as well. So I'm going to tell you about 3 things as regards doctors. First of all is cost. Okay, everybody knows that we are spending a tremendous amount of money on this. Anyone know about how much that is in the doctor's office? I know Michael Lighty knows, but how much a typical doctor's office or clinic spends on, you know, chasing paper and all that stuff, being on the phone like you heard those doctors in the video?
Time?
About how much? What percent?
30%.
That's a little high. Yeah, it's closer to 25 or 30% of all of the intake, all of the revenue that comes into a clinic. It's as much as 25 to 30%, you know, overhead just to deal with this. Okay, traditional Medicare operates at 2%, even lower, like 1.5%. I think it's actual figure, but we'll settle for 2%. You know, so that's very important for doctors. Why? All that time on the phone, not just eating into your paycheck, but all the time on the phone means time away from your patient. What happens then? Compliance. That's the second C word. So cost, compliance, okay? Meaning that, what does that mean in medical terms? Compliance. Nancy?
For care.
It means they're not going to follow your plan.
That's right.
It means you're not going to have the time to explain what your health plan is to your patient. What happens then? Their outcomes are lousy. Who gets blamed for that? The healthcare provider. What happens then? You get sued. So everyone here should know that malpractice in universal healthcare countries, particularly single payer ones where there is no bill, there's no fee at the point of service, as we know, we have twice the malpractice rate as those other countries. And why is that? Because we don't have the trust. We don't have that level of comfort. That's the third word, is comfort that we have with our patient, our physician. As Michael, I know, is very aptly pointed out many times, is that in Japan, for example, they see their patients on average 13 times a year compared to our 4 times a year. So you tell me who's got a better patient-physician relationship, okay? And how much less likely, I mean, they don't have a bill when they leave the hospital, you know, so that helps. I mean, lawyers like to go after the big bills, right? So, but more importantly, they have that time to sit and talk with their patients and answer questions, end of life care, that kind of thing. So, so let me just bring up the final thing here. I mean, 2 things actually from my own experience. I retired recently. I was an emergency room physician here in Southern California for 37 plus years, who's counting? And you know, 30 of those years I was with Kaiser in Orange County. And I can tell you that Kaiser, over the years, introduced more and more of this phony marketing and, you know, as far as I was concerned, corrupt business practices, basically waste, fraud, and abuse, right? But they would do it because they said they needed the market share. For example, what they call a skinny plan. Anyone know what that is? It doesn't mean weight loss. It means your coverage is skinny. And that means that it's a high deductible plan, right? So what kind of business model is that for an HMO, health maintenance organization, that's supposed to keep you healthy? That's how they lower their costs. Instead, they're introducing a plan where people are going to refuse care, and that happened to me time and again on my overnight shift in the ER, where people would refuse a CAT scan or refuse an ultrasound. We have a very good friend in the movement. Her daughter died because of a blood clot. Basically, they told her at the door in this hospital she presented to that it would cost her, I think, $3,000 or $4,000, and she said, "No, I'll just go home with my sore leg." 23-year-old who died as a result. So people would refuse tests. You know, next thing I know, I'm busy working the ER. Someone says, "Oh, that patient left," and you know, so every time a patient would leave, I would have to suspect that was going on. Besides the usual stuff that was more and more frustrating, like dental infections. I mean, every night on my overnight shift, I would see somebody with a dental infection. They just let it get so bad that they ended up oftentimes needing IVs, or they were in sepsis and, you know, needed to be admitted to intensive care. So, you know, that's why it's good for us as healthcare providers, that compliance, where they're going to actually do what you think they need, you know, because that's why you did all your training and everything, right? That's why they came to you to begin with. The other example I'll give to you is from my own practice is this horrible thing that's known as a copay. Bernie likes to call them co-payments. I don't know if that's a Brooklyn thing, but you know, I would tell you that to see me in an HMO emergency room, they introduced a copay of $100. Most patients had a copay of $100. And in the middle of the night, if you're having chest pain, you know, you're trying to decide, okay, is this, you know, acid reflux? Is this heartburn, or is this a real heart attack, right? So do you want people to stay home because they're worried about the $100? No. You want them to come in, get an EKG, go over your symptoms, get an exam, right? So that's, again, very divisive and likely even to, you know, to kill a patient. Every so often. I can tell you, when I would tell somebody in the emergency room that they were just having heartburn, not a heart attack, the next thought was, do I still have to pay the $100? And I'd like, you know, what could I say at that point, right? That's the plan that they signed up for. So, so that's kind of two examples. My background is I grew up here. You're supposed to start with your background first. I grew up in kind of the east side of LA, Monterey Park, Montebello. My father was a family doctor in East LA for many years, just like a stone's throw from USC County Hospital. And I used to go into the office with him all the time and, you know, do his paperwork and stuff like that. So I learned about insurance billing and Medi-Cal and Medicare billing and that kind of thing. Before that, even as a kid, I would go with him on house calls. House calls. Some of us are old enough to remember that. You know, the doctor came with a little black bag to your house, right? So he had one of those black bags, in fact. I had one too, but it was his. He gave it to me, and I don't think I ever used it. So, but I can tell you that, you know, it's like when a family would see him come, there was obviously relief in their eyes. You know, for whatever reason, they weren't going to the hospital. I don't know. Maybe somebody had a back alley abortion or something. I don't know. I was never told this kind of thing, but, you know, I suspect something like that. I was always, as a kid, I was sat down in the kitchen with some homemade pie or something like that. My dad would usually come out with a very worried look after seeing the patient, you know, and say things to me like, God, they really should go to the hospital, but they won't, you know, things like that. So I can tell you also that by the time I was a teenager, I was able to scrub in on cases in the operating room with him. He was a family doctor, GP, later went on to FP, but he could, in those days, before malpractice carriers told you couldn't anymore, he could scrub in on a case with his best friend, who was the general surgeon. So they would do, you know, an appendix every once in a while. I was going to say appy, that's for the doctors and the and nurses, or a gallbladder or something like, you know, pretty garden variety stuff, you know. But I can also tell you that my dad's friend, the surgeon, would send my dad out to the waiting room to tell the family how the patient did, because he had that kind of trust, that relationship.